Well, hello out there, viewing public, if there is any, and I hope there is. This is Mike Pelletier, semi-retired lawyer and author, residing and motorcycling in East Tennessee, with the fourth edition of The Unvarnished Truth. And today we're going to be talking about the Second Amendment right to bear arms, which came up last night in the third presidential debate. That's my dog Lucy barking at just about anything on the back porch. Who knows? But in any event, we're going to be talking a little bit about the Second Amendment, which did come up. Hillary Clinton was asked to defend her apparent opposition to the Heller decision of the Supreme Court, which declared that a right to bear arms and said it applied to the states. And let's start with the Second Amendment, a well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. And I would say the irony of the Second Amendment argument that conservatives make is that most conservatives subscribe to the view of the Constitution that they call originalism, that we should interpret the Constitution as the framers intended it. Then there are liberals tend to believe that the Constitution is a living document which should be interpreted according to contemporary norms. I tend to fall somewhere in the middle. I would call myself a textualist. And, the framers of the Constitution use words like reasonable, cruel and unusual. These are terms of art that lawyers know means different things at different times. Our standards of what is reasonable conduct in society have changed dramatically over the years. I mean, railroads used to not have to have crossing lights or barriers at railroad crossings. And that's changed. And, retailers used to not have to have lighted parking lots. So, I mean, these are evolving terms, reasonable, unusual. So I subscribe to the textualist approach. But the irony on the Second Amendment is that an originalist approach, which is favored by most conservatives, casts the Heller decision into some doubt, because the amendment begins a well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state. All the colonies had militias back at the time of the Revolution and the time this amendment was adopted. There scarcely was a United States Army. States had militias, and those militias contributed to the Continental Army, which fought against the British. I don't really think there was a United States Army during the Revolutionary War. But be that as it may, the right to bear arms described in the Second Amendment presumed the existence of these state militias, which no longer exist. So you could make the argument that if the state militias no longer exist, the right to bear arms no longer exists. All I'm saying is that, there's an irony. That's all I'm saying. But I believe in the Second Amendment. I accept the Heller decision. The right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. You can treat the well-regulated militia as non-existent fluff because there are no militias anymore. So we're left with the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed, and I accept that that's the case. But I do believe that there can be reasonable regulations that limit who can get guns. I don't know about the type of guns. I can only tell you that one of the reasons people have, high magazines and and semi-automatic weaponry and rifles and all this, AK-47s and all this stuff, is that many people are preparing for Armageddon, for coming civil unrest, and I've talked about that in other contexts. Our national debt, the rise in interest rates, the $19 trillion in debt, $500 million deficits, may contribute eventually to civil unrest, and people are preparing for that. We have to acknowledge that. But from a more limited perspective, people are certainly getting these weapons for defensive purposes. I firmly believe that the only way to stop a bad man with a gun is a good man with a gun. But I believe regulations. I'm not going to touch the question whether it's reasonable to regulate the type of weapons that people have. I don't think it is, because of what's at stake and what might be coming in terms of civil unrest. But I do believe it's fair to regulate who can get any type of weapon, handgun to machine gun. And I don't think the mentally ill, I don't think people with criminal records, should be able to obtain guns. I believe that, the so-called gun, all loopholes should be closed. Everyone who gets a gun should be required to have it permitted and have a background check to determine whether they are fit. Even gifts within a family. There should be no limit on, put it simply, there should be universal background checks. There just should be. That is sensible. The only way to stop a bad man with a gun is a good man with a gun. Another way is to prevent that bad man from getting a gun. Yes, it's true. There's a huge black market in guns, and bad men can get guns. I understand. But let's keep them out of the hands of the mentally ill. A lot of these, the killings which occur in this country are the product of mental illness, but not all. And that's something else I want to touch on here. And that is this, this question of law and order, this tension between law and order and the Black Lives Matter movement. My perspective on these police shootings of black suspects, for want of a better term, it's not. First of all, I think there's a fundamental misunderstanding. I don't think in most cases it's racial discrimination. It's often black police officers shooting black defendants, or white police officers shooting white defendants. But a lot of times when blacks are shot, it's black officers doing the shooting. So where's the race discrimination? There isn't any racial discrimination. The problem we have, and I don't know if it's a problem, it's the attitude that most police officers have, and that is that perps are scumbags. I'm in recovery, in a recovery program. I bring recovery meetings, a recovering alcoholic. I bring recovery meetings into jails and prisons. I have all over the country, really. And I've seen it firsthand. Wardens and jailers hate those bastards. And a lot of them are worthy of hate. They are, lowlights and scumbags. This is the unvarnished truth. That's the prejudice. No, it's not racial. It's that people in the corrections business, be they wardens, jailers, or cops, don't like defendants because they do bad things, make their jobs hard, and they do. In terms of, these specific arrests, and the so-called Black Lives Matter movements, I think in general, what I see in these arrests is overreaction by the police. That poor woman who, smoked a cigarette, blew smoke in a cop's face, and ended up, in a Houston jail for 3 days and committed suicide. Sandra Brand, I think, was her name. That's a sad case. Okay, so she's blowing smoke in a cop's face. Is that any reason to, pin her down on the ground and take her in? So there's an overreaction. But on the other hand, there's often resistance of arrest. A lawful order from a cop, drop the weapon. Even that kid, the 12-year-old in Detroit, he had a water gun or a toy pistol in his hand. He was scaring kids on a school ground. The kids alerted their parents. The parents called. He was brandishing the weapon. The parents called the police. The police come tell him to drop the weapon. He doesn't drop the weapon. They shoot him. Is that the police fault? No. Obey lawful orders from the police. The Ferguson case, involving Michael Brown. I mean, Rush Limbaugh is right to a certain extent that the whole Black Lives Matter movement is founded on a fraud. He never raised his hands and said, hands up, don't shoot. That never happened. He menaced that officer, tried to take his weapon from him, and was shot. He was shot in the face, not in the back. He wasn't running away. The testimony, hands up, don't shoot, came from a guy that he had robbed a convenience store with. The guy was a perp and was telling a lie to cover up what Michael Brown had done. So there's fault on both sides. And this is undisputed. Undisputed. There's no question that hands up, don't shoot never happened. Period. End of discussion. And law and order is a significant problem in our inner cities. It really is. Donald Trump is to a certain extent right. Can it get any worse for you? Why don't you try something different? Instead of voting for Democrats who cycle after cycle do nothing to ameliorate your problems or address your concerns, but ask for your vote every election cycle, by giving away goodies. What have you got to lose? And Trump's point is well taken. Chicago is a case in point, and it is astonishing what is happening there. The level of black-on-black violence is simply off the charts, and it's a product of gangs and drugs and alcohol and poor education and the absence of fathers. I mean, there's all kinds of reasons why this is happening, but the first thing we have to do is establish law and order in our inner cities. And that means strong police presence, stop and frisk, military equipment for the police, martial law if it's needed. We have to address the problem in our inner cities, and we have to stop black-on-black violence. We're not going to solve it by giving them more welfare or more food stamps or spending more for school computers. I mean, those are good long-term approaches to eliminate and alleviate poverty and lift people up. Job programs in the inner cities, that's all fine. But what we have to do is stop the violence now. It's like alcohol and drugs. The way to stop alcohol and drugs is not to stop address the underlying problems, at least not initially. That's a good down the road approach. But the way to stop taking alcohol and drugs is to stop taking alcohol and drugs, period. So we have to stop the violence in the city, period. It's tearing this country apart. So that's all I wanted to say on the Second Amendment, Black Lives Matter, Law and Order. This is the fourth edition of The Unvarnished Truth, and this is Mike Pelletier signing off on Thursday, October 20th, 2016. Have a good day.